So Saul, you're talking about the using our inherent rights and implementing our own laws and our sovereign government. And I know that on one of our other virtual town halls, we were talking about the Maori in New Zealand and how they just made the changes that they wanted made within the school system.
But they also made changes on their citizenship laws. The Maoris have their own citizenship laws, and it recommends that it has the criteria in it that if you have 1% Maori blood, you're you're Maori.
Interesting.
That's that eliminates a lot of what you're talking about in terms of lack of recognition. But you see, what I told Harry when he went to court on that case you were just reviewing, I said you need to include the need for the court to recognize your inherent rights and your inherent status. But he didn't do that. And when the case was won, what were your plans to implement what you won? Now that's not new. How many court cases, Supreme Court cases, have we won? And not a damn thing done after we win them.
Yeah,
Because we had no
exactly.
plan of action to implement them. And we had no will to recognize our jurisdiction and our inherent legal system on what we have to do to resolve these things we're talking about. So that's where it's at today. And yesterday, or day before, last week, I mean, I was on that call with the AFN federal government on UNDRIP and section and Bill C-15. The Justice Minister was on the second day, and he said, we have to change our policies under UNDRIP and section 35, and that's what we're doing now. And we challenged him on the specific claims policy that's outdated. And the specific claims policy only goes back to 50, 60 years for settlements. And ours that we're dealing with back home is 125 years old. But we challenged him on the citizenship and membership stuff. And he said, well, we're making changes now. We're making policy changes now in every area, he said. So where are we, you see, on that exercise that the province, the feds are going through right now to change their recognition of the status of our people and the identity of our people under new federal law. So when I said a while back to Minister Jody Wilson when she was Justice Minister, I met her here in Saskatoon with some chiefs. I said, you're going to do away with the Indian Act? First of all, you got to understand who you are and who I am. I said, we're not Indigenous. We're not Aboriginal. We're not Native. We're Indian right now, but I'm a Cree Indian.
Yeah.
I'm not just an Indian. I'm a Cree Indian. And the Cree Nation has inherent rights, inherent sovereignty, inherent title to lands and resources granted to the Cree Nation, Cree peoples by the Creator. That's who I am. And I said, that's who you are. Why are we tinkering around with this whole idea of categorizing ourselves under colonial policies and laws like Indigenous law, Aboriginal law, and so on? But we now have treaty rights and we have treaty status as well. And the Métis have treaty status. Métis adhere to Treaty 3 in Manitoba and Ontario. And you had some other treaties that you entered into as Métis Nation people. But when we look at that process, and you see, in dealing with the Minister of Justice's commitment to look at how we are going to change and amend existing laws to fall into line with UNDRIP and Section 35 and the treaties. What are we doing to do that? How are we going to do that? Well, if they want to do it with the Indian Act registering our people, they have to recognize the inherent rights and status of our people. So they have to amend their Citizenship Act. They can't leave it in a vacuum. So I told the justice people on their law review, the secretariat from Privy Council, Justice uh, Crown Indigenous Services and Finance. They had 4 secretariats in the law review. So they called me. We were on the phone for almost 3 hours looking at the unique and special laws we have to consider. And they wanted to know the form of some unique and special laws. So this is one of them I gave them in terms of dealing with the status and membership of us. So when we looked at that process, I said, look, under your amendment to your Citizenship Act, you'll recognize Saul Sanderson, the Cree, from the Cree Nation, the Cheikh Patient Band, with full rights and status in terms of my inherent rights, treaties, and treaty rights. Now that's what you got to do. And one of them said, oh my God, my colleagues have to hear this. But you see, we don't do that homework I'm talking about. So where is our Citizenship Acts and membership codes? What's wrong with us not taking action to implement them under our own government jurisdiction and law? When we do that, we also build in the portability of our sovereignty, treaties and inherent rights and treaty rights status between communities, regionally, nationally, internationally. We build in the dual citizenship status of our people. Why should you have to lose the nay rights if you marry and join the Cree Nation? That's not necessary. That's how we're running into all these categories of non-status, Métis, and so on that have no rights recognized. And I've told Métis leaders, look, if you deny your status of Indian and what you're doing, then you don't have any rights. Because your inherent rights are there because you're a Cree Métis or you're a Soto Métis or you're whatever in terms of your status. But you can't be denying your own inherent rights of your people that are tied and linked to your ancestry. Now, the other thing is, how do we inherit our inherent rights? Well, they're inherited from generation to generation. How? Through the female side, the matriarchal side, not the patriarchal side. And the church policy and government policy changed that. And we've got to go back to looking at how we deal with that. As far as I'm concerned, when you have a child in your marriage and your home, both the mom and dad are 100% responsible for that child from birth to death. Not 50% or 40% or 60%. 100% responsibility for the gift they have in that child that was granted to them by the Creator. Now, those are the types of things we don't talk about and deal with when we're looking for solutions. So those types of issues impact on all your members that you're working with at every level. So looking at your governing structure, then you got to move beyond an administrative structure of AMNSIS to a governing structure. You have those powers. You have the inherent rights and powers to do that with your membership. So then we look at the Métis inherent rights and status. Well, that whole framework I just gave you, that you looked at and heard, recognizes that. The UNDRIP recognizes it. The Organization of American States Declaration recognizes it. So our discussions in terms of what has to be done and how can get very sensitive because we got entrenched colonial thinking amongst our people in order to keep our peoples oppressed by not recognizing their rights and status collectively, like you're talking about. Right. So that framework is major. That framework is major, and Section 35 is major as well. It provides distinct recognition of Indian, Métis, and Inuit. Now, like I said the other day, that's a constitutional recognition of Indian, Métis, and Inuit. That's not an Indian Act membership recognition. So why are we still entertaining the idea of not having a global picture of how we deal with the identity and status of Indians under Section 35 of the Constitution, 35.2 of the Constitution? Because the treaties recognize and provide for us controlling our citizenship and membership. But they created that Indian Act that we keep talking about, and they keep throwing in our face to deny the status of our people. to the point now where they expect to have only 40,000 registered Indians in Canada by 1940. And we're allowing that to happen because of Bill C-31. They're registering Indians under the Indian Act in two categories. 1 year, they're all recognized as Indian and registered as Indian, but some don't have any rights or benefits. Some have full rights and benefits. But you see, we're allowing that. And you look at your own families today, even the ones that are on reserves with the bands. I got 3 chap bands that they're failing to recognize. And we got one that's Bill C-62, and the other one Bill C-63. So the one that has Bill C-63 status doesn't have any benefits or rights. Like, where the hell are we going with all this? When we can correct it by taking a stand and developing our own laws and jurisdiction. Now the same thing with lands. You see, we have inherent rights to the title to lands and resources, and they're acknowledging that in the treaty negotiations in BC right now. And they said you got to identify your territory under your inherent title to lands and resources, and you have overlapping jurisdiction and use and occupation of those lands. You got to resolve that overlapping jurisdiction collectively, but you also have to keep intact our crown title in some of those lands and territories. Now that's treaty negotiations going on right now. If they can do that in BC, what the hell is stopping them from doing it to negotiate with AMNSIS in terms of the people you're representing? Nothing.
Right.
And that's your powers. That framework recognizes the ongoing treaty negotiations between Indian nations and the Crown, but they expanded that now to the Inuit Nation and the Crown by setting up the Nunavut government, and the Métis can do it as well. That's what I say. Because half my family is Métis on my mom's side. Mackay's. My old uncle, before he died, he used to say, "We're Scots Métis. We're not Irish Métis. We're not English Métis. We're not French Métis. We're Scots Métis."
Oh, we're cousins.
Yeah. Well, mom's mother comes from Cumberland House,
Okay.
and her grandmother comes from Red Lake, Minnesota.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
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 So
So I
that's the type of
see,
thing.
I
Okay,
see
go ahead.
Alan has his hand up.
Go
So
ahead.
and then we have another question after Alan.
Sauli wahkunto yataganuma. Tansinitioagan. Inyuhtatin ka big squid. I thought I'd speak a little bit of Cree. So. But anyway, I'm interested in your presentation. When you talk about the framework, you're talking about the development of self-government. But in my view, what's happening in Canada at this particular time under Crown government relationship federally is they're giving us monies to self-administer. Now, there's a difference between self-government and self-administration. How would you define that and look at that, Saul?
Well, you can not only define it, you can identify what it's about. See, after 1900 to 1950, 1956, it was against the law for us to assemble as Indians under the Indian Act. But we had chiefs and councils elected under the Indian Act. But who was in charge? The Indian agent, not us. So what the government done after 1960, they developed what they call self-administration policy for the chiefs and councils to implement programs and services under provincial law and jurisdiction or under federal law and jurisdiction, not under our laws and jurisdiction. So that's 1960. And here is 2021, and we're still doing the same thing, you see? Now, why are we doing that when we can structure our own form of government using our traditional clan system, kinship system? but also our highly structured and disciplined societies like portfolios, but they were major ones, being able to operate our governments under our own laws and jurisdiction. So the big difference is that in 1960, they recognized the capacity for our chiefs and councils to administer on their behalf programs and services under laws that weren't ours. And we're still doing that today, not just by band or by tribal council. The Federation of Nations is doing it. AFN's doing it. The Métis are doing it. Everybody's engaged in that colonial policy stuff based on the 69 White Paper, 1980 Buffalo Jump, to terminate ourselves. Now, when you look at that strategy, then you see our system of governing under the Kinship clan system and the highly structured and disciplined societies. We had a democratic system of government. Those functions that you look at for the clans, clearly a legislative branch, judicial branch, executive branch of government, and how our highly structured, disciplined societies ran the programs and done the operations implementation under our governments. Now that's a hell of a major difference, but it all has to be done under our own laws and jurisdiction. Now we've got our own people resisting the recognition of our jurisdiction, but even worse, refusing to recognize our own inherent legal system. Like, where in the hell are we going with all this when we talk about our sovereignty and stuff like that? Yet we're taking action to implement those colonial policies that you know about, that I highlighted at one of the sessions. 500 years of colonial policy still being implemented today. The Papal Bull of 1493. Indigenous people are not human nor Christian. Because they're not human, they don't have sovereignty and government. They don't have title to land and resources. They don't have rights. Implemented in the church Christian policies and laws that were enforced by the empire, the governments of the empires. Now here it is 2021, and we're still dealing with those same issues. Why? Because we're failing to take action ourselves on what we need to do to exercising our national powers of governing, our national powers of treaty making, implement our inherent rights and treaty rights in every sector under our government jurisdiction and laws. And that's unique and special laws. And the federal government now can legislate under Section 35 their legal, fiscal, jurisdictional responsibility for all our inherent rights and treaty rights in every sector. Now, that's not just for Indians, that's for Métis. And they've done it for the Inuit through the Nunavut government that they set up in the territories. And the Inuit are not happy with that one either, because it's not really their Inuit laws, it's the colonial laws that they're having to implement. That's kind of a long answer to your question, but there's no short answer to it because people don't know of that history about the 1960 administration policies. And we're still implementing those administrative structures. Why? Because you've set up the executive branch of a government. You know how much it costs for them to run their executive branch of their governments today at the provincial, federal, municipal level? 35 cents on the dollar is what they collect for executive management. We don't see a damn cent. Now that's why they're resisting and doing what we have to do and how we have to do it. But I say we're going to do it. We're going to get it done. And don't kid yourselves because we're entitled to the same money they have in Ottawa.
So you're telling we're a major commodity.
Oh, we're a big business.
We're big business.
We're a damn big business in everything. Look at their hospitals, healthcare. Look at the child welfare. Look at the correctional centers. Look at the justice system. We're a big business, and I don't let them forget that. And I started working with 9 cabinet ministers, including the finance minister, privy council, and the prime minister's office over a year ago. I done a briefing document because they were asking, what are the alternatives to under the pandemic today? What are the alternatives after it's done? So I put a briefing document together and sent it out to them along with charts, similar type of charts that I gave to you. But the finance minister responded in 2 days. You know what he said? I will increase the $11 billion to $17 billion in the fiscal year 2021, 21-22. And I'm working now with Tara, the Director of Operations from Privy Council, to make sure the new finance minister stays to that commitment. So the new finance minister emailed me last couple of weeks ago, and she said, "I am putting all your documentation into the consultation process for our budgeting for 21-22." But you see, I want to see her take seriously a commitment to the former Treasury Board finance minister made of increasing the funding from 11 billion to 17 billion. But he also knew I was after additional money, like that social transfer of supplementary money that goes to the federal provincial governments from the feds. Major supplementary money in the billions of dollars. We don't see a damn cent. Yet when they provide for the money to be transferred, they include us in their calculations with their population. So what I'm saying is now we need a federal First Nations social safety net where all those billions of dollars will be transferred directly to our governments, our institutions, and our individuals. And I'm pushing for a guaranteed annual income. And the Liberal Party caucus, Liberal met, and they're going to table a resolution at the upcoming Liberal convention to push for a guaranteed annual income for everybody now. But I said, if you don't do it for yourselves, it's okay with me. But we're going to damn well do it for ourselves. Now, Spain has adopted the annual guaranteed annual income, and 2 other countries are looking at it. So I'll stop there for now. Any other questions? Or did I lose you?
No, we have a question from our WebEx administrator, Jillian.
Go ahead.
My question, though, Senator, was I saw a press release the other day from the federal government talking about the Child and Family Act that became law January 2020, inviting Indian, Inuit, and Métis communities, organizations to submit their notice that they're going to take this over and enact their own laws under their own jurisdiction. And I thought it was interesting, having listened to you speaking at these forums, and I just wondered if you could comment to that. If that's since Daniels, has the language changed?
Yeah, we in the Federation we developed the Child and Family Services Act about 15 years ago for implementation and enforcement. It's still not being done because we got some of our own people that are senior administrators resisting it getting done. But we have to get our own Child Welfare and Family Support Act in place, not just by one band at a time. We can do it collectively under our nation's strategies to occupy the field with our own laws and jurisdiction. And that's what's needed if we want to fix that problem of child and family services problems. Now, the bands and the tribal councils are stuck with the funding again. And I told them at Thunder Bay in Treaty 9 almost a year ago, I said, why are you struggling with funding when there's funding federally in 4 different sources? Crown Indigenous Services has funding for child welfare and family support. The new act that they passed now has funding for child and family support for programs and services, but they also have capacity now to provide the capital, both minor and major capital that's needed for child welfare and family support. But along with that, you have the Jordan's Principle for implementation. The Jordan's Principle has money for O&M, and they're supposed to add money for capital in Jordan's Principle now for this year. So then that major social transfer that goes from the feds to the province in the form of billions, it includes child welfare and family support funding for Indians, Métis, and Inuit, and for themselves. Now you see, where the hell is our Finance Administration Act that governs how we enter into government-to-government fiscal agreements in the form of grant funding and direct transfer payments, but funding based on our budgeting strategy on how we need to finance our governments in every sector, with total population being represented no such thing as a non-reserve officer of Indian anymore under that constitutional framework, because all those rights are supportable. So there's much we have to do in terms of child welfare. But again, we have to come together on what we're going to do about it. And they're concerned about the rights of the child and the mother. Well, we can do that kind of legislation making references, because the rights of the child and the mother will get protection and guarantees under our own citizenship acts and membership codes, not under the child welfare law. It can be referenced in there, but that's not the source for guaranteeing the rights and status of the child and the parents, recognizing their full status and their special rights.